So, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Bill White. I'm the coordinator for the Missouri Native Grasslands Collaborative. And joining me today is Jared Hubner. He's the director of prairie management for the Missouri Prairie Foundation, and Valerie Curry, the director for the Scenic Rivers Invasive Species Partnership. And we're going to go through, I think there's 10 invasive species that we want to highlight, particularly that affect grasslands, and then a species or two that are kind of coming on the scenes and invading some of our grasslands in southwest Missouri. And then we've got three pretty aggressive natives we wanted to talk about and some control options for them. This is being recorded, and by the end of the week, I will have this up on the Missouri Native Grasslands Collaborative website, and in our Zoom, or our YouTube page, so that it can be viewed by others, and if you want to take another look at it. So I think without further ado, Valerie, I'll let you kick things off.
Cool. Thanks, Bill. So yeah, like Bill said, I'm the director for the Scenic Rivers Invasive Species Partnership. So I kind of, and Bill kind of went over this too, but kind of our roadmap for today, we'll go over some definitions. That way we're all on the same page. A couple fast facts for you on invasives, environmental and financial impacts, quick review over integrative pest management. Then we'll go over some species IDs and treatments, including nuisance natives and some new and upcoming species of concern, and then mapping and tracking invasives. And then Bill also has some great information on drone spraying. Jared has some great resources for you. So yeah, it's going to be a good time. So just to get everybody on the same page, when we refer to invasives and non-natives, weeds, things kind of can get mixed up or mean different things to different people. So for this presentation, when we say non-native, it's a plant that was introduced with human help to a new place or a new type of habitat where it's not previously found. But not all non-native plants are invasive. So for example, forsythia, we see that planted ornamentally a lot here in Missouri. It's not native to Missouri, but we don't see it escaping into our woodlands and things like that. However, Callery pear, for example, is invasive. It's a non-native that was introduced, and we do see it spread. So that's a plant that's both non-native and able to establish on many sites, grow quickly, and spread to the point of disrupting the ecosystem. So things like spotted knapweed, sericea, other things like that. And then weeds are a plant that could be native or non-native that's growing in the place where it's just not valued. So for example, Queen Anne's lace, we don't really consider that invasive, but we don't like to see it maybe growing in some of our, places where we're trying to establish prairie, that's a weedy species. So that's kind of how that goes about. Or dandelions, for example, as well, maybe weeds in your lawn. So sure, most of you on this webinar probably know that invasives are a huge problem because they take up important habitat and compete with our native plants. They can spread very quickly, and they're introduced through many pathways. Some things that people may not think of, for example, though, is forage for animals, especially when we were in the drought here in southern Missouri a few years ago, and a lot of people were bringing in hay, not just from other places in Missouri, but even out of state. That was a huge vector of spreading some invasive species that maybe we didn't think about. Gravel is another good one. When the county works on, a county road, they bring in some gravel to, grade out or maybe put in a culvert, and maybe there's seeds in that gravel as well. Then, of course, you can also be a vector for spreading these invasives. So hiking, biking, maybe going out with your bird dog, and your bird dog has some seeds on its coat. So it's really important to clean your gear. And then, of course, the big one we always know is disturbance, wildfire, flood, all those types of things can bring in seeds and invasive species. We spend a lot of money on invasive species control. So the annual US cost is about $120 billion. In FY 2020, the Department of Interior, so that would be like Park Service and Bureau of Land Management, that would not include Forest Service, spent over 143 million to manage invasive species on 400 million acres of land. So that's about 35 cents per acre. And just some more, problems, especially when we think about grasslands. Invasives can actually affect different cycles within the system. So, like nutrient cycling, like the carbon and nitrogen cycle within the soil, as well as water quality and quantity. So, thinking about, plants maybe using up water resources that natives really need, or affecting erosion and things of that nature. They can alter fuel loads and contribute to hotter, more intense fires and increased wildfire risk. I don't know if you guys remember the wildfires in Maui a few years ago. That a lot of that was fueled by invasive grasses. So it's a huge problem to be aware of. They also affect pollinators because they can't provide host plants for larvae. So, like, think monarchs and milkweeds. And they usually don't have the same amount of pollen and nectar resources as native plants do. So, in terms of costs, when we think of invasive plants, it's actually cheaper to prevent invasive plant establishment than it is to treat or eradicate them, which is why, we try to educate landowners and other people, when you see something, take care of it now before it becomes a big problem, or maybe don't plant it in the first place. And then integrative pest management. So, or IPM. If you're in the realm of invasive plant management, you should know about IPM, but a good refresher is always great. So there are different branches of IPM, basically ways to help control invasive species. So one being cultural practices. So that helps reduce the pest establishment or dispersal. So this is planting native plants instead of planting invasives, or using certified weed-free products. So, if you're bringing in hay for your cows or your horses, making sure that's certified weed-free. Biological controls, so that's the use of natural enemies like a parasite, an insect, or other things to help control their damage. So, for example, there is a weevil that targets spotted knapweeds and thistles, and that is a biological control to help get rid of spotted knapweed. And then there's mechanical or physical. So that's you getting in there with your hands. So maybe you're putting in, for a home gardener, weed barrier, your hand pulling, your brush hogging, your weed eating, you're chainsawing it down, some type of mechanical and physical method of removal. And then, of course, chemical is the use of pesticides and herbicides. So I cannot do my job without herbicides, but we want to make sure that we're using them responsibly. So we want to make sure we want to use herbicides in combination with these other practices to make the best, most effective long-term control methods. Using selective herbicides when possible, so maybe using a grass-specific or forb-specific herbicide, and we want to try and minimize our spray area if practical.
Hey, gals and Josh.
Somebody have a question? Okay. And then when we're also using herbicide, we want to minimize the spray area if it's practical. So spot spraying versus broadcast spraying, because one, that's going to limit the amount of chemical we're putting on and the overspray onto native plants, but also it helps you save some money. The less herbicide we can use, the more money you're going to save. All right. So with that, we're going to move on to invasive.
My earbuds died. I've got to turn up my.
Let me
And
see.
then,
Yeah.
all right. I think, Bill, you're up next with some invasive plant ID.
Make sure you've got your microphone muted, whether you're using a phone or a computer. We're going to start with probably the most common and widespread invasive we have here in Missouri, and causes lots of problems in especially idle fields and plantings. Idle as in they're not hayed or grazed. It's a perennial, so it's hard to control on a practical level without the use of chemicals or digging individual plants. It has a small pea-like flower that starts blooming. We've probably seen it starting to bloom here in Missouri in the last couple of weeks. The flower is about 3/8 to 1/4 inch long. And we do have some native Lespedeza that are kind of lookalikes or can be confused with Sericea lespedeza. And the way to tell them apart is those upper two photos. The Sericea is shown on the left-hand side of the screen, and the veins in the leaflets, look like a herringbone or a fishbone. But if you go to the photo on the right with the native slender Lespedeza, that has more of a netted veins in the leaves. So that's probably the best way to tell them apart if you have some confusion on that. It's typically not palatable to cattle unless it's real small seedling, and it produces a chemical that stunts the growth of surrounding plants, so it will take over like that bottom right photo and crowd out most everything. So if you've got a native prairie or a pollinator planting or native grass planting in a wildlife program like CRP, it's one of those things you want to keep it from spreading and getting out of control because it will impact your stand. So one of the things that, and we'll go over this in a little more detail, is late summer burns to knock it back. That'll knock out the seed production. And then use a herbicide the following spring that's got a pre-emergence activity in it. Herbicides that you can use are Pasture Guard and some of the very similar herbicides with the same chemical ingredients. Some of the MSM herbicides like Escort do well late in the year. Pasture Guard is typically meant for earlier in the year, although you can increase the rate while the Sericea is blooming. And so there's pre-emergence also, like I mentioned, Plateau, Panoramic, and some others that can be used to keep seedlings from germinating. Next slide, please. And certainly if you've got individual plants out there, you can hand dig them. It's nothing you can pull because they've got a deep root system that just, unless you've got sandy soil, it's almost impossible to pull. So I wanted to share with you some preliminary data out of some control trials for Sericea down in Perry County that was conducted by the Missouri Department of Conservation. They used a combination of late summer burns and chemicals to really knock back the Sericea to a more manageable level. And my understanding, this was a field of native grass that the Sericea had invaded. And you can see in the middle of the graph off to the left, there's a little box in the middle of the graph. They conducted their first burn in September of 21. And if you go down to the bottom of the screen, you can see the different colors that are represented in the graph. The light blue was using Pasture Guard herbicide. The green was another herbicide called Method. They had a control where they all they did was burn in those controls. They used no herbicide, and then the baseline was what they started with up at the top of the screen as far as population. So September of 21, they did their first burn. They did their first chemical treatment the following summer. And I know they had some issues in these trials trying to get a herbicide sprayer brought in a more timely manner, but they were able to spray in September of the next year. Moving down that graph, you see they did another burn in late summer, early fall. And then the following year in 2024, they did their last herbicide treatment. And then by the end of, or the summer of 2025, they did stand counts, final stand counts. And they were finding there was not much difference between using method herbicide or pasture guard herbicide. Got about 90% control. They had a reduction in the control where they were just using burns. And one thing they were finding about the late summer burns is there would be a lot of Sericea sprouting yet that fall if they got the moisture. And because those seedlings did not get established before winter hit, there was a lot of winter kill on those seedlings, and it was substantial. So that helped with some of the control you see there in the summer burning. Let's go on to the next slide. Another one you're going to run into is a couple different species of teasel. And this is something that's being spread up and down the roadsides, and if it's not controlled, it is moving into adjacent grasslands and can have a substantial effect on not only the roadside grasslands, but also grasslands off the road. They have a large, deep taproot, so it usually takes some digging if you've got a single plant here or there, or some chemical in order to take care of those. They bloom starting in June, and some I've seen here around central Missouri, they still have some blossoms on them. They form colonies because of all the seed that comes off of those. They just seed down the landscape if you let it go. There's two types. One is common teasel. It has purple flowers or pinkish flowers and oblong leaves. That is up in the top two photos. And then there's a cut leaf teasel shown down in the bottom photo. It has white flowers and lobed or dissected leaves like you see there in the photograph. And where the leaves attach to the stem, they form a cup that sometimes it holds water after rainfall. So again, some of the strategies, you can dig the young rosettes, you can dig the adult plants as long as if you have a seed head that's done blooming, be sure and get that taken care of and don't let seed spread out of that. You can cut flower heads and mow close to the ground just to keep it under control. And you can also use burning in conjunction with herbicides. And some of the most common herbicides are going to be Roundup or Triclopyr. And I have seen in a couple areas here in Jefferson City that there are a lot of rosettes out there already. We've had plenty of late summer rains here, and so now would be a good time to go out there if you know of rosettes and get those under control. Next slide. Do I have this one too, Valerie?
Yes, sorry, I was muted.
So another one, it's coming in on roadsides. Vehicles hauling hay from out of state are bringing it into Missouri and is getting started on the roadsides and moving off on there. I have seen it out on some natural communities, especially in southern Missouri. And where it gets its start is right off of a vehicle trail through the natural community. So it appears to be spread by vehicles and equipment. It's a perennial. It can have a large taproot depending on the soil. Again, it forms like teasel, it forms a rosette in the winter months. You see that in the top left photo. And that is a good time, if you know it's out there, that is a good time to control it. Has lots of blooming stems and blooms in June and July. It's really productive as far as seed production, and those seeds can last up to 8 years or more in the ground. It's another one that produces a chemical that inhibits the growth of the surrounding vegetation, and especially where you're seeing rosettes right now, that is what is happening, is that chemical is thinning out the vegetation enough that those rosettes are getting a start. Some of the strategies, again, hand pulling or digging the small plants or the rosettes. Sheep and goats love it. There's some biocontrols, some I believe they're both weevils that have been released, especially in southern Missouri, to control knapweed. And then you've got several herbicides listed there. And I have used 2,4-D in the fall or this time of year on the rosettes and had really good luck with that.
Okay, I'm up next with the thistles. And for those of you that don't know, not all thistles are bad guys. And I love telling cattle producers this because a lot of those guys like to declare war on thistles. But we do actually have some native thistles and as well as invasive thistles. So whenever you can, I encourage you to leave the native ones. So we have invasive thistles like bull thistle, Canada thistle, musk thistle. And then we have native thistles like tall, Carolina, field thistle. And how you can tell the difference is pretty easily if you look at the undersides of the leaves. So on the invasive thistles, like the one on the left, on the leaf underside, they're going to have a green underside. On the native thistles, they have a lot of compressed hairs on the leaf underside. So they have a white or silvery, felty underside. So I always use the analogy with my landowners. If it's green, it's mean. If it's white, it's all right. So, and if you have a landowner who's, wanting to manage for birds, especially, and caterpillars and moths, thistles are great host plants and habitat for those species. So if you can convince someone to leave a couple of those good thistles, I do encourage it. They usually fade out with time in prairie systems. They can become a nuisance and then you're going to want to take care of them. But our native thistles don't tend to be as aggressive as the invasive thistles. Hang on a second. Okay. So our invasive thistles, they tend to establish on very poor soil conditions or overgrazed pastures, which overgrazed pastures usually do produce poor soil conditions, or they have low native diversity. Canada musk thistles are both listed as Missouri noxious weeds. Some of our other thistles are not. There's really not much that enforcement as far as noxious weed laws, but it's good to know. They do produce a ton of seeds and they have very deep root crowns. So sometimes it's really hard to remove these with like a shovel or even with fire. Sometimes you have to have a really hot fire to actually penetrate down to the root crown to actually cause damage. So there are a couple different methods. You can mow right after flowering for several years. But one thing to remember is you need to pick up those flowering heads because they get to a point where they will still produce seeds even after you cut them off from the plant. So if you're going through and cutting off, those flowering heads, you need to bag them up and take them with you, or else you've just basically planted seeds. You can try and hand pull thistles if you would like, when they're small, maybe have some really good gloves on. And then of course there are some weevils that do attack thistles as well. They have a flowering head one and then one that attacks the rosettes. The one in the flowering head is really cool if you happen to see like little boreholes in the bottom half of that flower, like where the green part is, you can cut it in half and actually see those guys going to work. So, and that'll prevent the flower from producing seed. So I have seen good results with treating these guys in the dormant season. So using like a 2,4-D ester formulation right before bolting in the spring. So before they send up that flowering shoot. And then glyphosate as well in the early spring before they bolt. Once these guys bolt, they really don't respond. They don't have a great response to herbicide. The more it's bolted and started to flower, the harder it's going to be to kill with herbicides. So at that point, start thinking about preventing it from flowering by cutting off those flowers or taking the flowering heads off so at least doesn't produce seed. Okay, Johnson grass. I think this one's mine, right? Yeah. So Johnson grass, this is one we have very common in southern Missouri. It's a perennial grass that spreads by rhizomes and seeds. A lot of people down here do plant it as a backup forage for their cattle, and under the right conditions makes a great forage. Under the wrong conditions, such as drought, which we're really starting to get droughty here in southern Missouri, it can become toxic to cattle under those conditions. So it is a risky thing to have. These form pretty dense stands and pastures. We see it along road right-of-ways, forest edges, stream banks. So it is quite aggressive. So we do have some similar looking natives like gamma grass and silver plume grass. We've got how to tell the difference between those on this slide. But normally, if you're seeing a giant field of something that looks like Johnson grass, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be Johnson grass. So how to remove this stuff? This one is a tough one to remove. You can do repeated close mowings. So that way, 1, you're preventing it from going to seed, and 2, you're trying to exhaust that rhizome underneath. Overgrazing before flowering is another option. So similar to the mowing, you can overgraze it. Now in southern Missouri, this strategy might not work as well, but in northern Missouri, if you can do some fall plowing to expose those rhizomes to the surface, and then you get some really good consecutive hard freezes, that would actually help kill the rhizomes. In southern Missouri, we really don't get cold enough for that amount of consecutive days to kill it, but in northern Missouri, especially by like the Iowa border and stuff like that, I definitely think you guys probably do. You can also disc it, but it has to be in conjunction with herbicide. If you disc it and leave it, it probably is just going to make it very angry, and you've just spread all of the rhizomes more. So herbicides, glyphosate, sulfofuron, so Outrider. Outrider is usually the go-to for us down here, and then of course a Mazapic as well. Okay, 15. Oh, okay, I've got 15 too, I guess. So multiflora rose. So as we know, this one's pretty common, especially like hedge roads, but it starts to creep into prairies with that woody encroachment, roadsides, open forest areas. Flowers May through June. So right now we're putting on the rose hips for seeds. We do have a native rose, and one way to tell the difference is if you look at the 2 pictures down at the bottom. There's a red arrow pointing to a structure on the leaf called a stipule. And the picture on the left, you can see is the stipule is very smooth except 2 horns at the top. That's our native rose. Our multiflora rose, which is the picture down at the bottom right, you can see the stipule has a bunch of fringes along the side with the 2 horns. So if it's got fringes, it's usually multiflora rose. There are differences with the number of leaflets as well, but that can vary sometimes. So I always like to look for the fringed stipule because that's usually around the longest. So strategies to getting rid of this, repeated mowings in the growing season for multiple years can help reduce it and exhaust that rootstock. Prescribed burning can also help hinder invasion or the establishment of it, just how we manage woody invasives in grasslands. You know, we do prescribed burns. It also is effective on multiflora rose. And then glyphosate you can foliar spray this during the growing season. You can also do like a cut stump herbicide application with triclopyr in the fall or dormant season. One thing that I recommend to folks, like let's say you're going through and cutting these with loppers or you're brush hogging, you want someone to go behind you with herbicide to apply that herbicide to the cut stump.
What decision is that? I got a quarter.
Huh?
I got a quarter.
I don't think somebody's muted, just letting somebody know.
Following the conversation. Yeah.
So with cut stump, you want to make sure that you're applying that herbicide pretty quickly after cutting it. So you want to make sure
those 2 things. The
I
directness.
think somebody's still not muted.
It's funny because
I think I got it muted. Whoop, maybe not.
dang it. I was talking to Ted and I think
There.
Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, doing cut stump application, you want to make sure that you apply the herbicide to the cut stump fairly soon after cutting it. Otherwise, if you leave it, it will form a callus over that wound, and then your herbicide actually won't suck into the cut stump. So I always like to have one person as the cutter and one person as the herbicide person following up. Okay, then we're gonna swing it over to Jared.
Okay, so this one is Japanese honeysuckle. I'm sure if you're anywhere in the Midwest, you've seen this one. It's a woody vine, semi-evergreen, especially in the southern half of the state. You'll see it along fence rows, any swale, basically anywhere it has something to climb. The leaves are not jointed to the stem, so you can see there's kind of what would you call that? A petiole, I guess, between the leaf and the stem. Yellow to pink flowers. It's very fragrant, smells really nice when you walk past it. And it does form dense mats over the top of native vegetation, so it kind of smothers out anything underneath of it. Prescribed burning repeatedly seems to work really well. It at least sets it back and allows you to treat much smaller plants as opposed to a giant mat of vegetation smothering the natives. Cutting the aerial vines at the base and doing a cut stump treatment works pretty well. Glyphosate seems to work about the best during the fall. So, being the semi-evergreen plant that it is, typically after the first frost or two frosts, this one is still green. Most or all of your natives have went dormant, and so you can just apply the glyphosate at that time and really have very minimal collateral damage. Crossbow and Garlon are effective as well. It's less effective to treat it in the middle of the growing season, like right now, though. Calorie pair. So this one was briefly mentioned earlier. Another one that I'm sure everyone is very familiar with. It was basically sold in greenhouses as an ornamental species. Supposedly was sterile, and all it took was one tree finding a way to produce viable seeds, and it's pretty much statewide in any idle field, roadside, and rapidly and increasingly getting into our native ecosystems across the state. Flowers, one of the first early flowering trees that you'll see with white flowers. It does have kind of a foul smell to it. And the leaves are some of the last ones to turn red for the fall. You can see in that top right photo, it does get extremely dense. I've seen it much denser than that, kind of like a cedar thicket almost, where you can't hardly walk through a thicket of the calorie pears. Integrated pest management strategies, hand pulling on the small trees. They get big quickly, so this is kind of the first year after sprouting from seed. Small trees, a foliar spray of glyphosate or triclopyr work well. I prefer to use the triclopyr. And then the medium to large size trees, cut stump treatment with pretty much any labeled herbicide for cut stump treatment, but glyphosate and triclopyr are kind of the go-tos for that species. You can also do a basal bark while the bark is really thin. So obviously that tree in the bottom picture, basal bark treatment would not work on that. You need a very thin bark so the herbicide can be absorbed through to the cambium layer. Autumn olive. This is one that I saw a lot more in the north half of the state. There's portions of southwest Missouri where it's somewhat abundant, but seems like the further north I go, especially north of I-70, I see more of it. It's a large shrub in open woodlands, prairies, and savannas. Pretty much anywhere it can get sunlight, it'll grow. So glades, little forest openings, things like that. It does adversely affects the nitrogen cycle. You can see in that bottom right photo, this is really characteristic of the species, that silvery whitish underside. So you can see it's kind of a pale green on top. You can pick these up from a pretty long distance, maybe 100 yards, and know right away that it's an autumn olive just by that silvery whitish sheen from the underside of the leaf. IPM strategies, cut stump method, treating with glyphosate and triclopyr, and picloram during the growing season, July through September. Basil bark works really well, especially on very large shrubs, so that you're not trying to cover the entire leaf surface with herbicide on a foliar spray. You just basically circle the trunk of these things with a basil treatment. Triclopyr with like a bark oil. Some folks use diesel as well. I prefer a bark oil that's going to absorb a little bit better than diesel. And then foliar spraying, especially on smaller, more tightly compacted shrubs, works really well. During the growing season, pretty much any time it's actively growing with full leaf out. Wild parsnip. This one's been around for several years. It's increasingly becoming a problem. It seemed like just 2 or 3 years ago, it was more of a roadside weed on our prairies. I have it on some of my sites that I manage around Pettis County, Southwest Sedalia, Coal Camp area. And it pretty much stayed on the roadsides for several years, it seemed like. And then pretty soon it was to the fence line, and now it's 10 feet in from the fence line, invading the good prairies. And actually, this last year, I noticed we had pulled a fence that went through the interior of a 90-acre remnant prairie. We left the wooden post because dick thistles and things like to sit up there and claim their territory on old wood fence posts. And I noticed parsnip sprouting at the base of almost every one of those fence posts this last year. So it is rapidly moving into these natural communities, it seems like. It's a monocarpic perennial plant, germinates from the seeds, so it spends the first year or more as a rosette, and then eventually bolts into that plant that you can see in the picture. Produces abundant seeds. Those are really big flower heads. To me, it almost looks like a prairie parsley in its early growth stages, especially if it's been mowed off and then flowers short. It can resemble that prairie parsley, which is a good native. But most common, it's this giant, robust 4 to 6 foot tall plant. So, again, most commonly you're going to see it along roadsides. It seems to move down with water and moves on equipment very readily. Does not seem to persist in heavy shade. Glyphosate and triclopyr work well for the treatment. Obviously, if you don't want collateral damage to surrounding grasses and things like that, use the triclopyr. It's more selective. But the big thing is preventing seed production on this plant. So this next, what we got 3 slides on nuisance natives. I think I've got the first one probably.
Yes. There we go. Sorry, went in advance for a second.
That's fine. So the first one, Eastern Red Cedar. So this one was, it's been native to Missouri, I guess, forever. So the first picture you can kind of see is where historically you would have found it. Rocky bluff tops, glady sites, essentially anywhere natural fires would not have reached. So kind of the furthest reaches of a woodland right next to a stream, where there was no ladder fuel to catch the cedar on fire. But for the most part, through woodland and open prairie grassland ecosystems in the state, it was held in check by fire. Whether it was a Native American set fire or lightning strike, things like that. So since the exclusion of fire, it's rapidly spread throughout the state and throughout the Midwest, easily takes over open grasslands, primarily idle grasslands, or similar to what Valerie was mentioning earlier, overgrazed pastures, things like that, where there's no mowing, no burning taking place, easily moves into those bare patches. Birds do really like it. It's valuable to insects. It's good winter cover, but it can be very detrimental to our natural systems in the state. The best management strategy is just cutting it below the lowest green leaf. So, like in a woodland setting, if you simply cut it below the lowest green branch, it will not resprout. You do not have to treat it with herbicide. And then for small trees like the one you see in that bottom left photo, just prescribe burning controls those. So as long as you burn up all the green limbs, there's no resprouting, no suckering, nothing like that. So really just not letting it get to the larger state is the best management strategy for cedars.
Yeah, sorry about the picture being funky. That is a side-by-side, same location of when they did some cedar management. So I'll let Bill talk about sumac.
Okay. So sumac is one of our native grassland shrubs, and it forms colonies in both pastures and non-managed grasslands. The stems might die back during the winter, but when that happens, more shoots are produced from the root stalks. And so a lot of the people managing grasslands with spring or dormant season prescribed burning, you are killing back that stem, and it's going to produce more shoots that following spring after that burn. I know some of the management strategies they use on the prairies to keep this under check is late summer herbicide applications with a wick especially, so you're not impacting native forbs within that prairie. Prescribed fire, again, stimulates it in the spring, but from my understanding, some of the prescribed fire they're doing during the summer months is knocking it back and keeping it pretty much in check. And then again, dormant season herbicide treatments are not effective on this one. So you have a few options, but not as many as in some of the other species we talked about. But this one will get aggressive, and it produces enough shade, especially if you've got native wildflowers, native forbs, and native grasses. It will shade those out over time. Next slide. This is one that has been causing issues with some idle plantings like CRP for the last 30, 40 years now. Canada goldenrod, another similar species, is tall goldenrod. They are extremely aggressive. They spread by both seeds and underground rhizomes, so they take over pretty fast. And it seems like they also produce chemicals that impact the other plants growing around them. So a lot of people wait until right at this time of year as it's starting to bloom and hit it with escort herbicide. So what happens, especially if you've got other native forbs in that planting, most of them have already flowered and are senescing or in the process of senescing, and the escort doesn't impact them as much. But if you got something like partridge pea that's blooming right now, you're going to impact that. Some of the other things that are blooming right now will be impacted. If you can wait to a little later in September to spray it, when some more of these plants are done blooming and senescing, you'll have less impact on them. Another option is to mow 2 times a year. You want to mow it as it's bolting up in probably late May and June, and then again as it's setting flowers right now. You want to prevent that seed production from happening because they are light and fluffy and they do blow on the wind. There's some more information. There's a study that was done at Purdue University where they use different herbicide and cultural methods, mechanical methods, and they've got the results of that study in there. And it is on our website, and that is shown there in the orange at the bottom of the screen. Next slide.
Okay. I think I'm next, and I'm going to yak at you guys for a couple minutes on a new species of concern that is mainly has been found in Southwest Missouri in a few counties. And I just wanted to thank Jennifer Larson with the U.S. Forest Service Region 9 office. She is actually the one who created and shared about this species of concerns during MNRC earlier this year. So, new species of concern, pincushion flower or Cephalaria translovicaina. Yeah, I'm really bad at scientific names. So Cephalaria or pincushion flower. So far it's been found in 4 counties in Missouri with a very scattered distribution. and we're really not sure how it was introduced here. And as you can see, unfortunately, we appear to be the central hub in all of the United States for this new invasive species. So not a great thing. So how to identify this? It's got a very slender, fibrous root system. It is an annual, so you'll see it complete its life cycle in one growing season. The leaves are opposite and highly dissected. So the lower leaves do have more numerous segments and hairs, but they're, as you can see, they're very highly dissected. So they have those big lobes in them, and they are opposite leaved. So they have these really pretty white flowers on very long, slender stalks, and the anthers are blue. So that's one of the really key identifiers for when it's flowering is if you have these white flowers with these really intensely blue anthers, you definitely have the cephalaria going on. And then for the fruits, they have these awned bracts, or bracts. So as you can see in those pictures, the kind of almost like spiky looking black thing on that seed head, those are the awned bracts. So that's what the seed looks like. So right now, what we're seeing in southwestern Missouri is it's forming dense stands along roadsides, but it does have the potential to spread into natural areas. And unfortunately, during our last Missouri Invasive Plant Council meeting, I believe it was Landry Jones may have shared, I can't remember if it was Landry or someone else, had shared that they are starting to see this creep off of the roadsides into, grasslands and managed prairies and things like that. So this is definitely something that we need to pay attention to for sure. As you can see here along the roadside on that right picture, I mean, it is one solid stand of cephalaria that could pretty easily go into that, that pasture next to it. We do have two native similar looking species that we want to make sure that we're not confusing with. So on the left, you'll see the cephalaria. The invasive one on the right is blue buttons is a common name for it. The leaves aren't as dissected, so they're not as, highly cut leafed, kind of like that. The flowers are also a different color as well. And then to make it even more confusing, we have a pincushion flower and a pincushion flower, which is why common names are sometimes so much fun. So we have the invasive cephalaria on the left, and then the scabiosa, which is native, on the right. Again, different flower shape. The leaves are not as dissected, and they don't have like the hairs on the bottom, as you can see in the cephalaria picture down below. So prevention is key. We are in the early detection rapid response phase for this plant. So the best solution, as we talked about earlier with financial impacts, it's much cheaper to prevent things from coming in or doing the early stages of treatment than established treatments. So far, well-timed mowings seem to really be a great method of treatment for these, since they are only annuals. If you time the mowing well to prevent it from flowering and going to seed, that seems to be a great control method for right now. If you want to learn more about this species, the Missouri Invasive Plant Council has a really good page on this species, but I know we're still figuring out, we're figuring this thing out as it goes. So, but so far, like I said, mowings seem to be the best option. So if you've got a landowner in Southwest Missouri and they see this, or you're a partner staff, you're MDC and you're driving along, this is not one to ignore. This is one that we need to get on right away.
Hey, Valerie.
Yes.
Hey, this is Landry.
Hi.
Hey, I appreciate you bringing that one up. That one's kind of close to my heart, so to speak. But yeah, I would say I don't know if mowings are actually going to do much control. And the reason I say that is I've got it out in front of my house, and the state came through, bush hogged the roadsides back in July when it had just started flowering, like just very beginning stages. And now the plant is about 15 inches tall, and it's all reflowering at that height again.
Got it. So maybe
So,
even multiple mowings or some other.
yeah,
Have you personally found any, other good treatments methods for it?
I haven't. It just showed up in my roadsides this year, and I did not get around to trying to spray it with herbicide. So unfortunately don't have any good recommendations from that standpoint.
We'll have to work together and figure something out.
Exactly. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. And this is Jared's lovely cheat sheet that I'm going to let him talk about.
So this came about several years ago. I think through some talks like webinars like this, mainly because we can't provide all this information on one slide for each species. So this is just a quick kind of cheat sheet for folks who haven't treated certain species or maybe completed, say, cut stump or basal treatment on a certain species. And so it gives you the common name, the Latin name, just a recommended herbicide, the actual herbicide name, trade name, and then percent active ingredient I thought was important on there just because you can buy a generic that may not have the same active ingredient. And so the mixing rates are going to be different than what I have here. But this is kind of just real quick. I know some landowners have told me they printed this out, kept it in their glove box. If they're out in the field and have some herbicide on them, they can mix it there. It's also got the timing of the treatment that I've had good experience with. And then kind of a disclaimer at the bottom to make sure you're reading your herbicide labels. So I'm not responsible for off-target kill, I guess. But yeah, this is handy, especially for maybe new staff or, like I say, just to keep on hand in case there's things you're not familiar with treating and they pop up kind of as a new species on your site.
Yeah, and I did put the link down here at the bottom. So I know Bill said he's going to post this, but you can view this at that link down there at the bottom too. This thing doesn't like it when I click off of it. Okay. I've got just a few more things to get you about as far as resources. So this slide I share with land managers, landowners, anybody who wants more information. So the Missouri Invasive Plant Council, or MOIP, has a plethora of resources on invasive species. They have their invasive plant assessment, which shows how, where in the state certain species are found and if they're spreading fast or not spreading at all. They have different guides on how to get rid of specific species. They just have a ton of resources. So that is a great resource as far when it comes to Missouri invasives. And then, of course, if you want anything that is native, we're getting rid of the invasives. What do we replace it with? Grow Native is an excellent resource to visit when you're looking for native plant alternatives or planting plans. Even, seed producers or plant people who have native plant plugs, they have a resource guide there as well. MDC also has some great resources on some of our most common invasive plants, where you can visit the page to look at both effective and ineffective or not effective treatments for that invasive plant. And you might think, well, why would I want to know what doesn't work? Well, because then you don't accidentally do it. If you're looking for a larger scope on invasive plants, whether, maybe it's something that's in a nearby state and you're wanting to know if it's on the move here, or if you're maybe on the border, in Illinois, Iowa, Arkansas, Midwest Invasive Plant. Man, I always forget to fix that slide. Plant Network, MIPIN, is a great resource for anything invasives in the Midwest. And this last one here, EdMaps, is one I'm just going to briefly touch on a little bit more. We could honestly do an entire training on EdMaps, but I'm just going to touch on it for right now. So what is AdMaps? It is a web-based platform used for tracking invasive species data, and it's not limited to plants. It includes animals, insects, pathogens, anything that's invasive. What's really great is they have their web-based platform where you can enter in your data, but they also have an app, both iOS and Android. And what's really great about the app is you can use it offline. So if you're in the middle of the Ozarks like I am and you want to enter in data, you can enter all that data on the app. And then once you get back into cell service or back home on Wi-Fi, it syncs all that data up to the web-based platform. What's really cool is not only can you map invasive plants, so whether it be, you know, a shapefile or a point, and take all that data saying like, oh, there's 20 stems here, or in this polygon, it's 10% covered and it's blooming. You can also track treatment data, which is really cool. So let's say you've got your landry and you've made a little polygon of your cephalaria on EdMaps, and then he's gonna treat it with triclopyr next May. So he can actually enter that treatment data, and then he can go back and actually say, like, do a survey on it and be like, oh, it was only 50% effective. So it's kind of almost like a way for you to track yourself and do some monitoring and follow up on, you know, your own invasive plant management or your agency's invasive plant management. What's really cool about EdMaps too is it syncs up data from iNaturalist. So any invasive plant that is recorded on iNaturalist ends up in EdMaps. It's not an instant conversion. I think they upload like every 3 to 6 months from iNat, but they do talk to each other, which is really cool. But yeah, when you take that infestation information, you know, you can enter the percent coverage, the size, the plant status. So is it flowering? Is it going to seed? Is it vegetative? And you can even attach pictures to that record. It's great for, you know, if you're, you know, a land manager wanting to, you know, keep track of things on your own property, but then it's also great for things like the SRISP, where I can look at data entered in Shannon County and cross-reference that with what Mark Twain has or what MDC has recorded, and we can plan some cross-boundary treatments. So it's a great way to collaborate. And it's also great to kind of give you a heads up on, you know, if something new pops up in your area. So like you can see this map here is Japanese stiltgrass, and I am giving the caveat that these maps aren't super accurate because it's based on user data. So obviously if nobody puts in that there's Japanese stiltgrass in Dent County, then it's going to show that there's no Japanese stiltgrass in Dent County. When we very much know there probably is. But it gives you a good idea. So you can actually sign up for invasive plant alerts. So for example, I have one set up for right now. So if somebody records cephalaria in any of the SRISP counties, which we cover a 9-county area, it's going to email me. It's going to email me that record about where it is, the GPS coordinates, any pictures, or any information that somebody tied to that record. They also offer a photo point monitoring feature, and that's on their pro version of the app, which is also free. You don't have to pay, it just has more options. So if you're big into photo point monitoring, maybe you want to do a before and after of a cedar removal or a before and after of some sericea treatment. It's got a really cool photo point monitoring system. So yeah, EdMaps has a ton of features. Lots of different things. You can run queries and actually download shapefile data to ArcMap for your own use. All kinds of different things. So this is just kind of a synopsis of what they offer. And if you want to know more, please visit their website. It's just eddmaps.org. They actually have trainings on their website as well. So any type, you know, if you want to learn how to use EdMaps or learn how to get the data off of there, they have trainings for all of those. So super handy. All right, Bill's going to tell us about drones.
Yeah, you know, it always bothers me if I'm spraying a field with a broadcast sprayer, only got spots that I need to spray. And if I'm using a broadcast sprayer or a flood nozzle or something like that, I'm overspraying the field I'm spraying. So there's some newer, I will say, in the last probably 5 to 6 years, newer technology that has come out using drones. And essentially what they do is these agri-service companies that use drones, they'll use a smaller drone to map the target species in the field, whether that's something like poison hemlock or sericea or whatever. They upload that map created by the smaller drone into their spray drone, and then that spray drone goes through that field in a grid pattern and hits only those spots where that invasive species or whatever undesirable species is growing. And so it saves a lot of time and it saves a lot of overspray, especially if you got something that you don't want overspray in, like a prairie or a pollinator planting. And so the technology is there right now. Now, how widespread it is, I don't know. But some of these companies that I have given the websites for on the bottom of the slide have the technology to map individual plants and spot spray them. And especially where you've got a diverse planting, I think that could be very valuable. The companies, and if you want to take a screenshot or a snapshot of this so you capture those websites, but there's 3 different websites in the on the web that can help you locate an agri-service that uses drones and has at least some of this capability. Now, the biggest drawback that I've had, and I've used a spray drone service to spray duckweed on a pond. The biggest drawback is they have a minimum charge. And I've seen it anywhere from $350 per site to $500 per site. So you would want to have quite a few acres in order to make up for that minimum fee. But it is one way to get your invasive species controlled in a more efficient manner. Some of the landowners that I've talked to says, I might spend all day on a tractor and a sprayer doing a grid pattern through my field to try and get sericea. But these guys, even when they're changing batteries and charging the spray tanks, are taking half the time I took on my tractor. So it's a new emerging technology, but it is something to consider, especially if you've got a diverse planting where you're not wanting to overspray. So with that, Valerie, we can go to the last slide. So if there's any questions, we'd be happy to take them. You can, if you're afraid to say something online, you can put something in the chat and we'll read those questions out. I did want to mention too that, we've talked a lot about herbicides, but in so many cases, that's the only practical way. A lot of these species, if you're going to go dig individual plants up, you need to realize that you're disturbing the soil and you're going to bring seeds to the surface if they're in the ground, and you'll have more plants the following year. So there's no ideal method out there. Some things are practical, some things are not. Some things will cause more problems. So unfortunately, herbicides are one of the few ways to take care of a lot of these different species. And I want to thank Valerie and Jared for taking time to help us out put this together today. We do have one question in the chat. Wanted to know what the minimum charge was on the drone spraying, and I've run into a $350 minimum, and I've heard up to a $500 minimum. It depends on the location and the company. But
I'll add to Bill, not to interrupt you. I know we have someone that's utilized drone spraying actually for cedar control. They spot sprayed cedar, and they said it was actually really comparable to a contractor going in and managing it in the more traditional sense of, either cutting it and then spraying it, or hand spraying it. So it's definitely getting more competitive, I think, with the traditional, contracting, spraying methods.
And cost share will, cover it, whether it's federal or state cost share, will cover at least part of that cost, that standard per acre fee that they charge. So it is something that is cost shareable. Are there any other questions? If not, thanks again for joining us today, and thank you to Jared and Valerie for their help. Oh, there's a question from Dawn. Where was that cheat sheet at again?
I will, 1 second, let me get back there. It's gonna be faster if I just do this. Boop. There we go. It's kind of a weird, here, and actually what I might do, give me 1 second, Dawn. There we go. There's a link for you guys in the chat.
Thank you, Valerie, for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If there's no more questions, we're going to let you all go. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.